Hello, everyone. Welcome. So good to see you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Michael. Thanks for making the time to join us this evening. I'm the events coordinator and publicist at Annie Bloom's Books. I'm going to have pauses here in this introduction while I admit people from the waiting room. For those of you who aren't familiar with Annie Bloom's, we're located in Portland, Oregon, in the heart of Multnomah Village. We've been around for 42 years now, and we are still going strong. We are open on weekdays from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and weekends from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Our website is always open. You can shop at annieblooms.com day and night. We offer curbside pickup, in-store pickup, local delivery within 3 miles of the store, and some various shipping options. I'm going to drop the link to this book in the chat right now. So that's how you can purchase Fire and Water right now, admitting everyone into the room. We have some great events coming up on Tuesday, October 5th. We've got Portland middle grade authors Deborah Hopkinson and Annie Bloom's own Roseanne Perry teaming up together. A couple days after that, on Thursday, October 7th, we've got another Portland author, Sarah Foster, with her book STEM Like a Girl, and plenty others. I will put a link for our event calendar also in here if you want to go and check that out. And we'll admit another person. Welcome, latecomers. My name is Michael. This is Annie Bloom's Books. Tonight, we are delighted to be hosting Mary Fifield and Kristin Thiel, editors of Fire and Water, Stories from the Anthropocene, and a whole bunch of other contributors to this book. Got a lot of folks who wrote stories, and they're going to be reading a page or so from those stories. That's going to be awesome. Kristin and Mary and others who live locally are probably available to sign copies of the books that you order. So if you have a personalization request when you're purchasing online, go ahead and put that in the comments section when you place your order. There's going to be a Q&A at the end of the reading, and you can type questions into the chat. I'll go ahead and read those to folks, or you can click on the little raise a hand button that's in the menu for reactions that you'll see down there on the bottom of the screen. You can also throw up reactions, not throw up, but toss up reactions during the reading, little hearts and clapping and stuff like that. I'm sure they would appreciate it. And let's see, Q&A reactions, I saw that. All right, let's talk about Fire and Water, Stories from the Anthropocene, featuring short fiction from authors with roots in 5 of the 7 continents. Fire and Water takes readers on a rare journey through the physical and emotional landscape of the climate crisis, not in the future, but today. This book is full of very real, very human and non-human characters who are living in this world we ourselves are experiencing changes in. In these pages, readers find grief and anger, but also hope and humor about the climate crisis and also about just regular life. Fire and Water is edited by Mary Fifield, who has published short fiction in literary journals and is working on a novel about the climate crisis, and Kristin Thiel, who has also published short fiction and nonfiction in anthologies. Among her writing and editing clients is Blue Dot Kids Press, which focuses on books on the environment and climate for our youngest readers. Awesome. Kristin and Mary, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Michael. And thank you all so much for joining us. While we are longing for an in-person gathering, we're thrilled that technology allows many more of us to come together tonight, including so many of our contributors, most of whom my co-editor Mary and I are meeting for the first time. Fiction gives us so much opportunity to think about, process, understand, and explore an idea. We hope that tonight, the excerpts that these writers share will help us all crack open that wondering and grapple with the complexity of the climate crisis. The topic is only going to become more urgent and prevalent. I know that I'm glad to have the wisdom, levity, new perspectives, and familiar comfort found in fiction to help guide me through. Each author tonight will read the first page of their story. We'll conclude with a Q&A. If you have a question during the reading, don't forget it, jot it down, or you can feel free to type it in the chat, as Michael said right now. We'll do our best to get it answered at the end. Let's begin now with our first reader.
I guess I shouldn't try to read unless I've unmuted myself. Hi, my name is Tomas Baiza. I'm zooming in from Boise, Idaho, and my story is titled A Seal's Song. Act 1, Plan. It was me and Balena who came up with this. We were forced early on to accept our limitations, orcas being fully aquatic on the one flipper and seals mostly aquatic on the other. If we were to get this project on the ground, so to speak, we would need help. We would need the damn bears. We hate the polar bears because they're idiots and they eat us every chance they get. It's been that way forever. Sure, everyone accepts the circle of life stuff, but still, it's hard to enter into negotiations when you've barely escaped last week's ice hole ambush. Out of gratitude to Balena, however, I sucked it up, you know, for the greater good. And the orcas, they eat us too, and bat our dead and dying bodies through the air like some sick game of water polo. Don't let their strangeness fool you, though. They're the smartest and toughest things in the sea. If this were a water fight, those behemoths would run the table, a frothing red tide from horizon to horizon. Nothing alive that they didn't say so. Those clicks and whistles and teeth. How could the sea conjure such flawless beasts?
I feel like we should clap or something. Anyway, I'm Vivian Faith Prescott, and I am coming to you from Tlingit Ani, the traditional and current homeland of the Shtakeen Kwan. My island's name is Kachkanaak, which is Wrangell, Alaska, located in Southeast Alaska. And Keishun Gitaan is the bay where the story takes place, and I also live. This first one, and she said I had to read till the rotting bait. That was my instruction. So I'm going to read to you till we get to the rotting bait. The places she journeys. Sami woman approaches fisherman with a star map traveling across her face. The dock rocks beneath her rubber booted feet, and she hollers down the finger to the man tying an aluminum boat up to the cleat on the bull rail. From a distance, she holds up her waterproof clipboard in the light rain to let them know she's a familiar fish technician collecting data. Hey, how are you? Catch anything? She yells. She knows better than to approach anyone nowadays without asking permission, even though it's her job with the Alaska Department of Fish and Game, where she's worked every summer for a decade. Sami woman pulls down her cloth mask, the one her auntie made for her early in the pandemic, and she smiles like a shapeshifter emerging with an old story ready to tell. She pulls the mask up over her mouth and nose again, and she speaks. The gold stars on the Alaskan night sky appear to dance. The fisherman doesn't answer her, and Sami woman slow walks towards the boat, passing the old trawler with the peeling white paint and the rain-filled skiff with the crab pot next to it with the rotting bait inside.
So hi, everybody. My name is JoeAnn Underwood. I am joining you from Portland, Oregon in the United States. And the name of my piece is Wo bist du? Rolf put his fingers to his eyes and realized they were iced over. He yelped and rubbed them until tiny frozen tears cracked and fell away, and he could lift his lids painfully. Everything hurt. His neck, his legs, his head hurt, and his face hurt, and his eyes, limbs so stiff he could hardly move them. He tugged the sleeping bag down to his shoulders. Anna's seat was empty. Hey. He turned, looked in the back. The back seat was less full than it had been. They'd filled it almost to the roof, wisely or unwisely, when they'd left town the night before, when they knew the big snow was finally coming, when Rolf had finally relented. Okay, he'd said, okay, you're right, let's go. Go where? Anywhere. South. Rolf had started rifling through his drawers, pulling out random shirts. What are you doing? Anna said. What do you mean? Look.
And I think we've got Tara next.
Okay. Hi, I'm Tara Williams. I'm kind of on a tripod of existence. I live between Portland, Oregon, Lake Havasu City, Arizona, and I'm currently in Silver Lake, California at my daughter's house. So I'm atop the tripod there somewhere. The name of my story is The Ice Child. Long, long ago, when the green world we know yet slumbered beneath thick glacial sheets and a comforter of snow, the ice child was born. Her mother, belly hot and heaving, had ventured alone deep into the forest where, under spires of pine and a chipped glass sky, she lost her way. While crossing a frozen stream, she fell to her knees. She fell to her hands and knees, pushing and groaning, the snowy owls echoing her grunts and cries, till the child emerged at last, transparent and perfect, connected to her mother by a silvery rope of ice. With her sharp-edged fishing knife, the mother severed the ice cord. She opened the front of her coat, fashioned from the skin of a winter wolf, and cradled the ice child upon her breast. The infant's blue lips suckled eagerly, her tiny ice hands cold and grasping, and the mother's love flowed like warm honey from her heart, crystallizing where it touched the child, whom the mother named Gaska Gerdi in the ancient language of her people, ancestors of the tribes of the far, far north. Winter was the ice child's father. Weeks before the birth, the mother had fled his frigid embrace, fearing she too soon would find herself among the frozen maidens piled in stacks outside his palace walls. That's it.
Hey, thanks, Tara. So my name's Jack, and I'm coming from unceded Wurundjeri country in Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. My story is called Escape Out the Back Passage. Dad left early on a Sunday morning. It was the start of summer, and for the next 4 weeks, I would be alone in the house where my family had once been happy. Dad didn't want to go back to driving trucks, but he was desperate. Our well was dry, and the cost of getting the water trucks to fill our tank was prohibitive on the wage he made bartending at the local pub. I was sad to see him go. Although we struggled for conversation, we had grown close in the wake of my mother's disappearance, following each other from room to room, eager for the company. But also, I was 17. I liked the idea of being in control of my life for once. The night before he set off, Dad sat me down over a dinner of fish and chips to lay out the grand rules. They were as expected. Stay out of the liquor cabinet, go to school every day. There was to be no takeaway except on Sundays, and I was to use the internet for homework and emergencies only. Use it too much and I'll cancel it, he said. There were to be no boys over whatsoever, which was fine by me. I was plain and mousy. They wouldn't come even if invited. And I'll leave it there.
Hi, my name is Etan Nechin. I'm zooming in from Brooklyn, New York, by Israel. And my story is called Natur Mort, and it has an epigraph by Henry David Thoreau from Walden. Things do not change, we change. My car broke down. just like that. I bought it 2 years ago. It was heavy blue with upholstery that struggled to stay in one piece. It had room for 7, but was meant for 1. I would sail down wide road, surrounded by mammoth semi-trailers, making my vessel drift on clouds of diesel fumes. And now it was dead. No warning signals, no clinks or clanks, merely the death of a machine. It was midsummer, and the road danced in the heat, bending and steaming, pushing to reach an oasis to cool its star-made skin. I touched my car. The hood was broiling, the last fever before the mechanical rigor mortis set in. I had been waiting for an hour or so when I decided to take shade at the top of the hill and wait for evening before trying to get some help. I walked down the narrow highway shoulder. Zooming trucks were playing a game of catch with one another, and local radio stations blared from their open windows as they sped by. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Etan. My name is Mary Fifield. I am in San Diego, California, and I'm going to read from Irene's Daughters. At quarter past the hour when she was supposed to meet Ricardo Salinas, former mayor turned real estate developer, Danielle leaned against a cinder block wall and fiddled with the used iPhone she had bought from her landlord. Everyone at home already had one, but anything with an Apple logo on it cost an arm and a leg here, and she was not exactly flush with cash these days. Besides, her policy from the very beginning had been not to call attention to herself to the extent that was possible as a 6-foot-tall white woman with red hair. The day was soupy and hot, exactly the right conditions for a tropical squall that she suspected would not materialize because storms during this rainy season had been few and far between. She moved to the shade cast by her neighbor's canela tree and dragged her finger across the screen. Would she ever use half of the stuff on this thing? She slipped the phone into the woven wool satchel she'd been carrying around since her Peace Corps days and zipped it shut. A shiny black Ford Expedition careened around the corner and slowed as it approached. Under the right wind conditions, she could detect the hum of that chassis half a mile away. Her breath caught in her throat.
All right, hello everyone. My name is Jessica Meeker, and I am the writer of Glacier Bear. Well, I am from Billings, Montana. That is where I'm tuning in from. Sadly, not the prettiest part of Montana, but it's decent. All right, so I'm the writer of Glacier Bear. So, a small cabin just beyond the Alaska Range shuddered under the weight of fresh snow. It had been falling for days, but finally today the sky would clear. The sun would hover above the mountains for the first time this winter, allowing Ivan to travel away from the cabin without a flashlight. He pushed open his front door into the snow, sweeping away the snowdrift on the other side. After clearing the path, he tucked his shovel back inside and closed the door. There was no need to lock it since very few ventured out in this temperature. Ivan strapped on a pair of rusted snowshoes with worn straps, but pulled one too roughly and nearly snapped the leather off. He cursed and tested the grip to see if it would last the trip. Satisfied, he began to clamber over the snow pile surrounding his house. At one point, he had carved steps into the snow, but due to a warm wind from the south, parts had melted and refrozen, making climbing difficult for an old fisherman with a rough knee. At the top, he scanned the twilight landscape. Behind him, nameless mountain peaks rose from the earth. On one, a bald area of exposed rock and fallen trees showed evidence of an avalanche.
Hi again, I'm Kristin Thiel. I'm zooming in from Portland, Oregon, USA. My story is Morse Code of the Yellow Rail. Daria fully expected to die by a volcano. Not by lahar, as say if the 26 glaciers on Mount Rainier melted under that volcano's heat and helped to create a mud flow so big and thick and violent that it buried everything in its path. Not even by ash clogging the air and trapping greenhouse gases. Even though the United States was second in the world for number of volcanoes, Daria didn't fear volcanoes in that way. No, what she'd learned from her mother, indirectly, was that volcanoes offered foolproof suicide. When the climate got bad enough, Daria would just walk right up and jump. If the fall didn't kill her, the sulfur dioxide fumes would choke her. If that didn't get her, the 1800 plus degree lava would. Though, of course, Daria never spoke this plan aloud. It seemed perfectly reasonable to Daria, given the circumstances, but her parents would never understand.
Hi, everybody. I'm Stefan Kiesbye, and I'm dialing in from Santa Rosa, California. And my story is called Smokeland. He tasted smoke on his dry lips and quickly got up to walk into the living room area. Yes, it was certainly smoke, but the detectors did not sound, nor did the sprinklers come on. He walked stiff-legged toward the 9-foot white glass doors leading into the yard and pushed aside the curtains. After several seconds, he closed his eyes, rubbing and wiping at the grit. On opening them again, he found he still couldn't see any more than he could a few seconds ago. He pushed open the glass doors and stepped onto the concrete patio. The world had disappeared. The city had expected the rebuild of the neighborhood to take upward of 5 years, but after only 2, the streets around the park showed barely an empty lot. Most of the neighbors Carmen knew personally had moved into their new homes before him. 22 months after the fires, he'd received his keys. Now it was October again, and wildfires had again sprung up in California, this time since August. His fence was gone. His bare feet stuck in ready Birkenstocks. Dressed in gym shorts and a bulky t-shirt, he crossed what had been his lawn. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Omar. I'm a writer based just down the street from Annie Bloom's, a little bit south of Portland. It's my pleasure to be here as a supporter of the anthology and a surrogate reader. I'm going to be reading you the first couple of paragraphs from a story by one of the contributors who couldn't join us. His name is Carlos Labbé, and his story was translated by Will Vanderheiden. I think this might be the first time I've ever read someone else's work at a reading, but I'm assured that Carlos is okay with this and has given his approval. I thought this was a very beautiful story. This will never end, I was reminded, hearing again the sound of the rain. As long as earth exists, there will be sowing and reaping, cold and warm, summer, winter, days, nights. This place will never be condemned because of man. Who whispered this in my ear, hour after hour, despite the headphones or rubber earplugs I always wore, the hum I learned to make with my mouth before deciding never to speak again? Silence. In silence, I stayed until, weeks later, on one of my excursions, I found him sleeping with arms spread wide, naked, soaked, and barely visible out in the wetlands that now cover what was once destined to become the launch pad for the Ark. A few months ago, the venerable Joseph Hazelwood Jr. would have been proud to have created a 2 million acre swamp. Now his mind was only capable of insulting the herd of waymules that appeared in the ruins of what had once been the house's English garden, as if they gave a shit about some old drunk running towards them, flapping his arms, screaming. Thank you.
Thank you, Omar, and thank you, everyone. That was so wonderful. And I just want to reiterate what Kristin said earlier in the evening, that it is such a privilege for us to be able to be in the company of such incredible authors who have contributed their stories. And Omar, your support as a blurber and a participant in our live stream, it's really wonderful. And I was reading in the chat stream lots of comments about cliffhangers. And even though Kristin and I have read the stories numerous times, it was a brand new experience getting to hear everybody read them and ending where they're ending. So thank you, everybody. Omar, maybe we can begin the Q&A's discussion with you. As someone who has supported the project and blurbed the project, and someone who writes about the climate crisis in his own work. Can you tell us a little bit about what drew you to this collection and how and why you pull elements of the climate crisis and related issues into your own writing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that I was drawn at a fundamental level by the quality of the stories, but also the variety of the stories. And a lot of times when you talk about cli-fi or whatever the description of the genre is these days, there's almost an element of comforting distance that people tend to insert between the present and the time of the story. And certainly I've done this in my own work, where you want to extrapolate. And one of the things I really loved about this collection was that I think it took quite a bit of courage on the part of all of these writers to pull away a little bit from that. So for lack of a better phrase, the nowness of the anthology really spoke to me. I thought it was brilliantly done. I mean, I don't know how to do this properly. And I think a lot of people who write in this world would say the same thing. We are at the beginning of something rather than the end of something. And I think beginnings are a lot harder than endings because we don't know. We might be at the beginning of the coolest summer we have this century, might be the one we just went through. And so I think it's a lot harder to function in that mode, and to attempt to function in that mode is a dangerous and I think necessary thing. And the fact that the writers in this anthology were attempting to do that with great success, I think, and very varied forms of success, really spoke to me.
I really appreciate that point. And I think that the fact that we are having to process it as writers and artists and people as we're living through it is different from other moments in history when we have been reflecting on something that has passed. So I appreciate that. Let's go ahead and open up the questions for other participants. Michael, can you help us maybe navigate if there's any questions coming up? And if not, we've got some that we can pose to the group.
All right, absolutely. Yeah, feel free to type them in the chat and I can read those aloud. Or again, if you hit the reactions button, the little smiley face with the plus sign down there on the bottom right, that'll bring up a raise hand thing. We will find you and let you ask a question on video.
Okay, great. Well, while we're waiting for people to feel inspired,
Hey,
there's a hand.
All right. Asking Norma to unmute. There we go. What you got for us, Norma?
I was wondering, I realized that you put the books in the order, I think it was author's last name. Is that right? But I was wondering how you decided on that. Oh, sorry, I hit my wine glass. On how you hit on that as the way that you were going to organize them.
Norma, do you mean the order of the stories?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for asking.
As opposed to, like, you know, you could have done snow and what, I mean.
Right. Kristin, do you want to take that? Or do you want me to take it?
Sure. Yeah, in the book, it's not, did you say they were alphabetical? That's an interesting, somehow they work that way.
I thought they were alphabetical by last name, weren't they?
You know, the bios are, maybe you were, anyway.
Sorry.
They're not, no, that's fine. They're not alphabetical. And it was sort of, It began, we sort of thought about the ending and the beginning. Etan's just seemed to be a wonderful way to conclude the book, and Jennifer's about a man inadvertently, Jennifer, who's not here today, and her story is inadvertently, the character inadvertently opens a portal to another world through which animals can escape. And that just seemed like a perfect opener. So we sort of started with those bookends and felt around then a little bit from those, looked to the middle, thought about different ways that we could offer readers breathers between, sort of particular topics or super serious versus having some more humor to it. And that's how we went. So it was a lot of kind of, once a bit of a structure was there, then sort of just feeling it, what seemed right. Because as Mary said, we both had read the stories multiple times, so we could kind of just see how they felt to us. And then we discussed that and fiddled with it a little more and went from there. Mary, do you have anything to add?
I would just say, we worked with Black Lawrence Press as our publisher, and our editor was kind of in charge of anthologies. Anthologies is one of his kind of focus areas. So he gave us some guidance too in terms of putting coming up with the order of the stories. But I was surprised at how intuitive a process it was. This being the first anthology that I've ever edited, it really was kind of just sort of feeling what seemed to flow, and kind of like putting together a mixtape. So anyway, it was a really interesting process in that way. So thank you for that question, Norma.
I have a question that's in the chat that was, I think, accidentally directly messaged to me, but I'll just read it for everyone. From Anne: climate change is such a topical issue. How did you go about choosing the stories and the order to present them? You covered that. But how did you choose the stories initially?
Go ahead, Mary.
This was actually kind of Kristin and I sort of had a long period of figuring out, what kind of work are we even looking for? We knew that we wanted to focus on climate in the here and now. And actually the genesis for the anthology came from a book that we had read by Amitav Ghosh called The Great Derangement. And he basically, it's kind of a clarion call to literary fiction writers to address climate crisis in literary fiction. It's been a great topic of great literature in science fiction and fantasy, but less so in sort of realistic or present day fiction, let's say. So we knew we wanted to kind of go in that direction. And we put out the call for submissions. And one of the great things about this project was that everybody whose work appears in this anthology kind of helped us answer the question. We really didn't know what we were going to get. And that was kind of part of what made it a beautiful and risky and scary project, but also something that, in my opinion, so far exceeded what I was hoping we would come up with. So yeah, that's how I would answer that question.
Yeah, I think that was great. And I'll just echo that that part about the authors sort of helping us define it. It was just magical in that way that we'd see a story like, hadn't thought about that, and it's just perfect. It fits. So we're very lucky. We cast, as you know, since we were lucky to receive authors from all over the world, that we cast the net wide, and we found some people who are just as passionate about this, which is great.
All right, I'm going to ask a question from the chat, and then we've got a couple of folks with raised hands up on screen there. So Carrie Luna asked, for the authors, would love to hear from someone. There is so much to navigate about the climate crisis. How did you choose what to write about? Who's the least shy of the authors who wants to jump on?
I don't know if I'm the least shy, but I guess I'll answer. So this story was actually one of the first that I'd written, and it went through a lot of different drafts, but the initial idea came from one of my writing teachers who at the end of class said, okay, I want you to go out and get a headline from any website, any reputable website. And then she said, no, wait, I don't care if it's reputable, any headline, it doesn't matter. And then write a story about it, or write a one page just to see where you would go with that. So I left class, popped open the laptop, and the first thing I saw in the New York Times was a story about a big ruckus that had been caused by some polar bears that invaded a Russian fishing village. And I don't think there was any loss of life, but certainly there was a lot of chaos and mayhem. And I thought, I should write about that. How could I not? And then I thought, I don't really want to write a story or start a story about bears attacking humans. What would make them do that? And then it just rolled out from there. I thought, okay, they were not coerced into it, but it was an accident. Why was it an accident? They were teaming up with somebody. Who would be the least likely group for them to team up with? SEALs. Okay, let's go. And then the story just came after that.
Great answer.
All
right.
Oops.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I'll jump into. So in 2017, parts of Santa Rosa burned down, and my whole neighborhood actually burned down, including my house. And yeah, to me, the question at some point became not so much just about sort of what the fire took in terms of property, but more what kind of strange and dark and nefarious things the fire actually interrupted by taking out whole neighborhoods. You know, like sort of like life strands that might have been sort of on the down low in the dark corners of something, and how were those interrupted and how did people make sense of that interruption? So not to see it as just the loss of personal property, memories, like trinkets, all that of life, but also the loss of the kind of unobserved corners that you had before, when you had a neighborhood and things were going on and that nobody was allowed to know. And so Smokeland is part of that, of trying to piece together the uncomfortable things that were lost.
Thank you. Tara Williams, I think, had her hand raised first. Tara, what's your question?
Well, I'm wondering if I should ask, because it's kind of a question. Well, I guess it's a question for everyone. As I was reading through the stories in the anthology, I couldn't read more than a couple at a time. I find that I write different stories of climate fiction over the years, and I have a deep interest in climate change and trying to find some way to use what I know how to do in order to try to make some sort of small difference. And, you know, I just have a general question for all the writers, and also for Omar, who I remember seeing at Fish Trap a couple of years ago. Loved your book, American War. And, you know, how are people grappling with this? Writing a story is one way. It doesn't always feel like much of a way. And I really like the part of the description of the book that talks about finding ways to survive and live through this challenge that's facing us. So I'm curious, you know, what do people do? How do you cope?
Wow, that's a great question. Who wants to take that on?
I can definitely, because I started going to graduate school for environmental arts and humanities. And the classes were so hard to handle. They were so depressing, and just remembering what I had to read and go through just almost makes me want to cry because it was so horrible. And I was like, how can I reach people? Because nobody wants to look at the statistics. People are tired of the statistics. You know, we've had climate change statistics since the 1960s. If you guys know I can't remember the name, the curve. But we've had those statistics since the 1960s, and we still haven't changed. So I had to drop out of graduate school because I was getting so depressed from it. And I was like, how else can I make a difference? How can I, as an individual, reach more people? And I thought, books change people. It helps get ideas around. So how I handle it is through writing. Like, this is my first publication, and I'm very excited about it, but I realized I could reach a lot more people with the books than the statistics, sadly, because the statistics are super important. But yeah, people they're tired of the numbers, and they would rather read about it than look at numbers, it's sad, but that's how I go through it. I live in Montana, and Montana's been on fire for the whole summer. It was smoke, hazardous air all summer. So our way of handling it is through writing and trying to be responsible as an individual. So yeah, if that answers the question.
Very well, I thought. Claudia, you have a question for us?
Yeah. So this sort of piggybacks on what Jessica was saying and Tara's question. First of all, I read the whole anthology and I just love it. And I'm going to be teaching it in a senior seminar in the winter. So one of the big things that I'm struggling with is how to not make the class just be so grim that students leave feeling that they need to just stick their heads in the sand or jump into a volcano or something like that. And so I was struck when reading the stories how some really showed hope through like education, like Kristin, your story with the camp for eco grief, I think it was, or change, the possibility of change in individuals, like the kind of magical realism story about the portal and the animals. So I was wondering, and this is a question to everyone, when you started writing your story, did you have in your mind that you wanted some elements of hope in there? And did you have a thought that you wanted an ending that had a little bit of hope? Or did you think, no, damn it, there's no room for hope here? Or did your end just kind of write itself as you wrote? You maybe didn't have a plan as you started.
I want to jump in. That's the last thing I'm going to say. I don't have any hope. I don't think there is hope. I don't think there's reason to hope. We are way past the point of no return. And even, I mean, we have basically zero chance, but we might give ourselves sort of 0.5 millimeter sort of between the fingers. And we're wasting it. We're completely wasting it. I mean, just listen to the news, just listen to everything that's going on. There's absolutely zero hope that we will turn this thing around. And the question is then, okay, but what are we going to do then? And to me, it's kind of ignoring that we don't have a chance and do everything as though we did. Sort of like, I'm not religious, I'm not with Martin Luther especially, but he said this thing that if the world would come to an end, he would go out and, like, if he knew the next day the world would come to an end, he would go out and plant an apple tree. And I think that's what we're kind of all doing. I think we're all too smart to know I mean, not to know that our governments worldwide are doing zero, and we're not doing enough. Like I said, my neighborhood burned down, but everybody is back. The cars are bigger. Everybody has a boat. They're washing the concrete. They're power washing the boat. They're power washing the house. They're power washing everything. And we have a super mean drought right now here. So we haven't learned anything. Not even the people who were really, really affected by climate change have learned anything. And still, we still have to go on and ignore that there is no hope.
May I heartily disagree. And not because I don't believe all of this, because I've been deeply following it for at least 30 years, and which is when I first became, as a teenager, came into awareness of fossil fuel dependency and couldn't sleep for 2 weeks. I feel that we have developed a level of comfort in a climatic sweet spot that we've grown very accustomed to. And I also realize that human beings have been around for hundreds of millions of years in some very extreme conditions. And so it's, I think it's more about staying aware of what's going on and preparing ourselves for difficulties on a level that we're not accustomed to dealing with. But I do resist this idea of no hope. I believe that life goes on, whether or not it's in the form of human beings, we'll see, but that will kind of depend on us.
When I started writing the story, the first page was just about the plot. These polar bears attacked a village. Why the heck would that happen? I had to dramatize that. And then what I knew eventually was that a theme that I tend to write about in stories is the least expected person or character being the one who fights the hardest to affect change and who experiences change as a result. That's why I brought the seals in. No one really expects them to do much, especially in effect a teenage female seal in an extremely dimorphic species where, you know, the least empowered being is the young female. And so I thought what I didn't even think about, but what I just intuited, because it's what I tend to write about, is that this is the character who's going to give everything that she can to make sure that there's a difference. And I knew that in the end, I would write some kind of story that ended somehow that communicated the need to accept that we're going to need to sacrifice if we're going to continue to have hope, and that there's nobility in the fight, and that if we give up, maybe we don't deserve to be around, but if we don't give up, maybe that will be the spark for hope. And she never gives up hope, despite the fact that she's abandoned by her colony. She never gives up hope because she's able to think larger than herself. And so that's what I wanted to impart in the story, and that's what I believe even on a daily basis with me. I'm a little person, but what little can I do that can help if enough of us do this and make a big difference?
Thank you.
May I
Tomas.
jump in here?
Yeah, Jack, go right ahead. And then I think we probably need to go to closing. Please go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, I mean, I just think this question of hope is really interesting, and it ties up so much of what everyone's been saying. I think it's, in a sense, what's interesting about thinking about climate change for me anyway, is that it sort of seems to reflect a much deeper history that we've all kind of been living with, you know? Really, for the last 500 years, environmental destruction has characterized and brought to the end, you know, so many societies. And yet, so many cultures, despite experiencing things that look like climate change, you know, like population displacement, loss of ecosystems, food, etc., you know, those peoples are still here and they're still thriving and still finding hope and resilience in despite of that. And so I think when we turn to pessimism too heavily, I think that can do a real violence in trying to reinscribe the way that we're already living. And I think that in looking at the catastrophe honestly and seeing it as a disaster, but also acknowledging that there's another possibility, that like the failure of our society actually reveals to us that there is another way that we could live life. To me, that's where the hope in these stories kind of emerges from. And that's what I think is fascinating about climate change, that it represents, I think, as you were saying earlier, Mary, that it is, in a sense, we're looking at the end of a world, but it's also the beginning of something exciting. Yeah, so that was just spinning around my brain.
Thank you, Jack. Any of the other authors who haven't chimed in on this or any other topic have a few parting words before we wrap up?
Yeah, I can just a quick note. I think when I started writing a story, I kind of just wrote this story without any kind of plot. It was supposed to be a story about nature, but an observation. And I got to the end, and there was a metaphorical like hole in the story, right? Which that's what I mean is I didn't set out to write a quote unquote climate story. I think this is a situation we all are living in. So in my writing or in my editing, I edit Journal of Immigrant and Refugee Literature, which actually Omar is in our last issue. And I think it's like when people are at war or crisis, they write in that situation anyway. So it kind of seeps into whatever it is they're writing, whatever it is they're doing, whatever it is they're thinking about. So I think kind of climate writing, whether it's intentional or not, I mean, it's all around us. And I think as it progresses or I think there'll be more and more of this kind of evident. And maybe from that, there will be maybe new ideas or new paradigms. Because I think and I think this discussion is so great because it gives, instead of being kind of didactic about and having a moral, but it's just a lot of stories that are kind of lived in this world. And it kind of gives us the possibility to think about other ways of being and living in this now.
Thank you. Vivian or Jan, any thoughts to share?
Yeah, I write mostly about my community, and since we're on an island and everyone's my cousin, so they make good characters. But I live at a fish camp, and one of my mentors is my dad, who's 80. He'll be 82. We just smoked fish today, by the way. I smell really good, like smoked coho. But so I wanted to write a story about salmon and how that's affecting us, because I see change already at my age, and my dad certainly sees the changes that he's gone through in the fishing, and then I intermarried among the Tlingits, so I have access to elders and people who've seen the changes that us colonizers brought. So that's kind of what I wanted to put in my story is about the changes we see, not cultural changes and climate changes all at the same time, clashing. And that's pretty much what happens on a daily basis anyway. But trying to share that with the larger world is, thank you for soliciting my story, which you did. Somebody did.
We are so thrilled that you wanted to be a part of this, Vivian. So thank you. Jan, have you got any thoughts to share or?
Sure. It's just such a rich conversation. I'm just trying to hold it all. And even when people's perspectives maybe contradict each other, it's like there's somehow it's all resonating in there for me. So yeah, I was thinking about trying to tease apart pessimism from grief. And sometimes it's really hard to tell the difference, and I was grieving earlier today over the article that just came out about the species, all the list that they've just announced of the species that are extinct. And, I can go to pessimism really readily from that place. But, hearing some of you talk, I thought, oh, maybe I can put a little space around the pessimism and just give myself the time and place and permission to grieve, which is real. And it's, if we don't let ourselves feel our grief, we get paralyzed, and yet not get stuck in a place of complete hopelessness, because really, action is the only thing that keeps me out of a place of complete hopelessness. And I do little bits of this and that, and it's never enough, right? But another thing that I guess I was thinking about is there's not time to learn a new skill set. I don't have time to become a scientist. I don't have time to learn how to be a community organizer. I have to do what I can do in the context where I live with the skills that I already have. For me, that's storytelling, right? That's what all of us are here because we're good with words and stories. That's our superpower, but everybody has a superpower. And so you just have to use what you've got where you are and do what you can. And it's going to take all of us.
What a wonderful way to kind of bring pull some threads together, Jan. So thank you so much for those comments. I think we're close to the time when we promised to kind of conclude the program. So Kristin, I'll hand it over to you for a bit there.
Can I interrupt just there's one more question in the chat that I wanted to.
Yes, go for it, Michael.
It's a simple one. Jill Collins asked, can you tell us about the cover art? How was it chosen to reflect the theme? And I was hoping that someone out there had the book they could hold up and show us the cover. There you go. Cool.
Let's see. There we go.
Yeah, where'd the cover come from?
Yeah. Well, basically, Kristin and I spent a lot of time trying to choose the cover and figure out what we wanted. We wanted something that was kind of aesthetically suggested, something ominous, something a little bit surreal, something out of place or off kilter, but also recognizable. The cloud, the upside down umbrella is a little bit weird, but also commonplace, and something that was kind of arresting. So something that would kind of pull people in to the collection and kind of pique their interest, but also be beautiful. I think it was really important for us to kind of highlight the beauty of these stories, as complex and sometimes pessimistic. Sometimes they're funny. There's a lot of things going on in these stories, but they're all really beautiful. And we wanted a cover that kind of reflected that. Kristin, I don't know if you have more to share on that.
No, that was said very well. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Okay.
And I'll just say thank you now to everyone for coming. Your support of independently published books, independent bookstores, and short story writers, especially right now in this sort of unpredictable era, great environmental and societal changes, and a pandemic. It just means the world to us that you would spend your evening here online with us. Definitely a big thank you to all the authors, especially the ones who are able to come tonight, many from very different time zones. So we appreciate you staying up or putting a break in your day to join us here. As we mentioned before, we were so fortunate that when we put out the call for submissions, we didn't just get great writing, we got individuals who are passionate about this topic and supporting each other. It's been wonderful how people respond over email to having their story in this anthology. We've become quite a nice group in that way. And of course, I think Annie Blooms and Michael, who was willing to take a chance on an in-person reading and then stuck with us even through all the necessary changes. So thank you very much. Oh,
thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no. I'll throw it back to Mary.
Okay.
Nice.
And I just want to echo Kristin's thanks for all of you who have participated in Zoom and made the transition from an in-person reading to a Zoom reading. It's really wonderful to see everybody. Thank you so much to the authors and to Michael and Annie Blooms. We'll have our links in the chat to our website, our social media feeds. You can follow we're going to be basically posting news and events on our website, so you can follow us there. If you haven't bought a copy of the book, Annie Blooms has copies on hand. They make great Christmas gifts or holiday gifts. Also, we are really interested in supporting local bookstores and independent bookstores all over the place if we can. So if you're in another area and you'd like to see Fire and Water, please just ask your local bookstore to carry it. And last but not least, we would love it if you are a Goodreader participant or are interested in being on Goodreads. We would love to have ratings, reviews. That's a great way for us to kind of get the message out democratically, outside of sort of like, corporate publishing. And it's a great way to support independent presses and authors like us trying to come together to do something that is hopefully breaking a little new ground and part of something that we hope gets bigger. So thank you all so much. It's really been wonderful to be here with all of you.
Thank you, everyone. This is being recorded and it'll be up on our YouTube channel very, very soon. So if, folks who weren't able to attend, point them that direction and they'll be able to watch it. Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.